Cause you feel my mind, or you feel my mind. We could build a dream, start up something new, and the world is on your shoulders, and you feel like falling over. Just let me in your head so I can be there for you, there for you. The night is young, won't you sing for me? Won't you sing for me? Till we fall asleep.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to VC Masters. I'm Nick Pallavino. I will be your host for today, or at least the guy behind the scenes. And today we have a very exciting program, especially if you are in the venture capital community. These are things that you must know about. And the real problem is when I was in school, I didn't know anything about it because, frankly, it did not exist. And this is the wonderful world of Oz. And if you don't know anything about the wonderful world of Oz, they're known as opportunity zones. And what it does for you, it allows you to exit your startup without having to pay taxes. Now, that's a big one. So with that, we're going to have a special guest, Blake Christian, who is a CPA and also has a master's in business and taxation. He kind of like specializes in this area. But first of all, we're going to bring in our interviewer host, who's a professor at Duke University Business School, Dr. Salman Azhar. I'm really excited about this show because listen, in the world of taxation, last thing you want to do is to make a lot of money and turn around and give it to the federal government, the state government. Then you go, why did I do this? So it's not an area I specialize in, but we do have a guest from the Southern California area. Matter of fact, received his master's in tax from the University of Southern California, Blake Christian. So we're going to have you discuss this because I know everybody in the VC community needs to know this. Otherwise, you are working for the federal government, not one of my most favorite things to do. So we're going to take it away from there, Dr. Azhar, and see if we can help people out here in this world of wealth.
Definitely. So lots of exciting things to learn today. So you've already probably heard of a lot of VCs moving out of California to Texas and Florida and other states to avoid state taxes. But what they don't do for you is avoid federal taxes. So this is kind of a program that is focused on specializing in legally minimizing your tax burden. And picture this. I mean, you invest in a company. So one of the companies I invested in is Amplitude. Amplitude exited and giving me 171x return. That's 171 times the money, which means that on 170 out of $171, I owe taxes now. And now that I owe taxes, I have a huge tax burden to bear that I have to pay immediately as soon as I sell these. So, approximately 20% of this is just gone. But actually, that's what you think. It's more than that because beyond a certain level, your taxes get taxed at your income tax level. So it becomes even a bigger burden. So what we are here to learn is how can we legally minimize the tax burden? And for that, we have our whole panelist, Blake Christensen. Blake Christensen, tell us, how can we legally reduce our federal tax burden?
Right. So the Opportunity Zone program came in under the 2017 Trump Tax Act, but to give full credit, the program was actually, its genesis was under the Obama administration. They didn't get it pushed through Congress in time, so Trump inherited it and has, in usual Trump fashion, has claimed it as his own, and it's a big part of his economic platform. So in a nutshell, and it's interesting, the people that really crafted this whole program were mainly billionaires, and they had high concentration of founder stock in some cases, real estate concentration. And the typical millionaire billionaire strategy is hold on to it till you die, get a step up in basis, and leave your kids tax-free appreciated assets. But they said, hey, why don't we incentivize people to divest during their lifetime, but we're going to put some strings as most tax programs do, you can only defer the gain by investing into what they call underserved communities. And there's over 8,700 opportunity zone census tracts throughout the country, and they're distributed based on population. So California and New York have the high, and Florida have the highest number of opportunity zones. California has about 1/10 of them. And then you get a state like Utah that I operate in, and they, we have about 18 census tracts. So again, the idea is within 180 days, kind of like a 1031, if you roll all or part of that gain into an opportunity zone fund, you will defer paying tax until that gain will mature on December 31st, 2026 under the current law, and you'll pay tax in April of 2027 on that gain. So you get basically an interest-free loan for 2 years. Now, that's kind of exciting, but the real payoff is, let's say you rolled a $10 million gain and you put it in a venture activity, and now it's worth $100 million in 10 years. You sell that, and for federal purposes, that gain disappears. You don't pay tax on it, all that appreciation. And if it's a real estate project, all the depreciation you claimed that would normally be ordinary income recapture, that disappears also after that 10-year hold. So it's a very, very powerful program. Our firm, HCVT, we have helped set up about 200 Oz funds, multiple billions of dollars of projects in those. And there's going to be people, down the road that'll have billion-dollar tax-free gains in 10 years. So it's very, very powerful, very, very flexible. And I've been practicing for 45 years, and by far, this is the most impactful from a community development standpoint, as well as super beneficial to the tax investor.
So Blake, when I think of opportunity zone and I think of underdeveloped areas, I'm thinking of things that are really would make me a slumlord or something like that. But when I look deeper into it, a lot of opportunity zones are not quite that way. They are basically up and coming areas, and they are investments that make sense from just purely investments perspective. What have you seen in this area?
Yeah, so when the program came out, probably 25% of our calls were, hey, I've been reading up on this program, and I just so happen to already own, 4 or 5 lots, or, I have a multifamily project that we're starting on that's already in the zone. And there were some effective dates that were kind of constraining. There's some related party rules that you have to work around. But for the most part, some people, as you're indicating, they kind of fell into their lap. And so you can still get some partial benefit, even if you already own the land. But it's in the other 75% of cases, people would go out and we would help them find, either raw land or some project to start in a qualified opportunity zone. Obviously, with your background in venture capital, and that's one of the unique things with our firm, is probably 20 to 25% of our Oz funds have operating businesses within them. And I find that, and I said it from the outset, that's going to be the holy grail in the Oz investment arena. If you hit a grand slam in real estate, maybe you quadruple, quintuple your investment. In a venture capital situation, you might, as you said, you might get 171 times return, and that's really nice to get tax-free treatment on that.
Lovely. So walk me through the scenario. So, let's say that I invest $1 million into a company, and when it exits, it is $100 million. So let's make it $101 million. So I have $100 million of tax burden now, or a capital appreciation burden that I would be taxed on. So how would the opportunity zone work in that case? What is the minimum I need to invest? What's the maximum I need to invest? And how do the numbers work out in the end?
Right. So unlike a 1031 where you have to reinvest 100% of your proceeds, you only have to invest your gain. I know in this case it's almost all of the proceeds, but so if you wanted to defer your entire gain, you would have to roll $100 million into an Oz fund. Now that could be what we call a public Oz fund. It's not publicly traded, but open to the public to invest in. But 90% of our Oz funds are what we call captive Oz funds. So you just set up an LLC, generally a partnership, within 180 days, and you roll that $100 million into that Oz fund. Now you've started the process. You have started the deferral of that gain until December 31st, 2026. The $1 million that you originally invested, you can walk with. Again, unlike a 1031 transaction, so you can walk with that and not pay tax on it. And then there's along the way, every 6 months you have to make sure that you're in compliance under the Oz rules. They're not very burdensome, but you do have to walk a fine line to make sure that you're staying compliant. And also in the interim, for 31 months, there's what's called a working capital safe harbor period, and you can invest, in stocks, bonds, etc., while that money is, being sorted out for, either a real estate project or an operating business. But I highly recommend anybody that's a serial entrepreneur that is either a real estate developer or knows real estate developers that they trust, do your own, projects. Don't go and invest in a third party project, because they're going to take 25-30% of the profits before you see anything.
Yeah. So what about the compliance? Is that difficult to manage, or is that somebody like you would manage? Because I can't imagine managing, taking care of all the compliance issues when it comes to this.
Yeah, about 25% of our work in this area is salvaging faulty Oz funds, because there are a lot of foot faults that you can make, and so that is something that we specialize in to make sure people stay compliant. And I can write a book on all the horror stories, but usually we can salvage them. Sometimes it takes a private letter ruling, which are pretty expensive, but and we do a lot of private letter rulings for other CPAs, and we're also back office support for a number of CPAs across the country, because this is so highly specialized. I will tell you, I'm not trying to make it more stressful or complex than it is. It's actually a fairly straightforward program, but you do have to monitor the investments and make sure you follow the rules. And there's all in, there's about 1,000 pages of regulations. The code is quite short, but there's a lot of regulations that came out over a couple of years.
So is there a minimum holding period? So, I've taken my gains, I put the $100 million into an Oz fund. Do I have to hold it for a certain period? And once I do sell it, what happens to that? And then related question is that the step up in basis that you were talking about is only helps up until a certain limit of your estate. And after that, you have to look for other means like Oz and stuff. So maybe you can take those two questions in one, or maybe separate them.
Right. So as far as the timing, you actually end up, after you fund, let's say you funded, you had a December gain, you rolled it in March. Then by the end of the year, you actually have to set up a secondary entity underneath the Qualified Opportunity Fund, and that's called a Qualified Opportunity Zone business. And but it could just hold real estate, or it could hold an operating business. And you need to drop 90% of the cash that's sitting up at the QOF level down into the subsidiary. That the rules are much more flexible at the subsidiary level. That's why you need to drop that down. You can only hold 10% cash up at the QOF level. But once you've dropped it down, then you can invest, as I said, in a portfolio. You can invest in Bitcoin, whatever you choose. Once that money goes down into the QOZB, you have what's called a 31-month safe harbor, working capital safe harbor period. And that gives you the flexibility to not be forced to invest in Oz property yet. You can have that portfolio, but then, as you start getting up to that deadline, you have to invest at least 70% of the total assets into tangible assets, whether it be land, building, or the operating business, fixed assets. And so every 6 months, we have to make sure that 70% of the hard assets are sitting in Oz qualified assets. And again, the rules are really liberal in the 31-month period. You don't have to run that 70-30, but after 31 months, you have to have at least 70% in Oz qualified assets, which opportunistically we say, oh, well, that other 30% can be non-qualified. So you could have another project that sits outside the Oz location, and you won't blow up your Oz fund. So they give you, as I said, quite a bit of flexibility. One of the most flexible tax programs I've seen.
And then when you sell, obviously the whole purpose of entering any investment is to exit at a profit. But let's say this, I take this 100 million and now I sell it for, let's say, 300 million. Obviously this is not VC, so the returns are not going to be like a 171x or 5x or so on. What happens now?
Then, as long as you've held, and the 10-year hold starts when you put the money into the QOF, the parent company. So you could sit on that money for as long as, it works out more than 3 years. You could just sit on cash, and then you pick your investment, and so the investment, you'd only have a 7-year holding period. But again, the liberal architecture of the program, they start the clock at the time that you put the money into the QOF, the parent company. So once you reach that 10-year mark, then you could sell. You could have that, $200 million increase, and that is fully tax-free for federal, and about 90% of the states, most notably that don't adopt the program, California, North Carolina, and I don't know why they didn't like it, and Arkansas, and there's a couple other East Coast states that haven't adopted it. There's only about 5 or 6. And so, you sell it, and you pay absolutely no tax on that appreciation. You don't have to do anything special, no special structuring of the sale. You just have to wait the 10-year period to sell and make an election to step up the basis. It's like you died, same thing. You get a step up in basis, you sell it, no gain.
So the step up of basis only applies until what? I think $11-12 million, something like that.
No, that is Section 1202, and I'm glad you brought that up, because we were actually the first firm to really market the fact that you can use 1202 in conjunction with opportunity zones. So the way 1202 works Now you have to be a C corp, and you have to be careful how you got your stock and things. But Section 1202 has when you exit, as long as you've held it for 5 years, not 10 years, you were a C corp that entire time, you can have an exemption per shareholder of $10 million. I think that's what you were thinking, the limit. Or it's the greater of $10 million or 10 times your tax basis. So if you had, startup company and you put $15 million in there, you could get $150 million tax exemption. So what we do in the Oz world is we will start off as a partnership. If we see, let's say it's a tech company, it wrapped up in an Oz fund, and now we're profitable. We say, hey, let's convert to a C corp. Let's start the 5-year clock for 1202 start, and now we could exit in 5 years from that C corp conversion date, rather than waiting the 10 years from the time you set up the QOF. So anyway, we use those in tandem in a lot of cases. So it's a lot of advanced planning that we do to make sure we can have multiple ways to exit and not always have to wait the full 10 years.
That was actually going to be my first question. Should you convert to a C corporation if you have an S corporation or you have another entity? Because it sounds to me, Blake, it's better off to do the transaction in a C, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, so we like to start off as a partnership because typically you have startup losses. If it's real estate, you're going to have cost segregation, you're going to have bonus depreciation, you're going to have R&D credits flowing out if it's a venture capital type investment. So take advantage of the flow through, and then just convert when you've used up a lot of those flow through benefits.
Yeah. Another thing, you just had my head spinning with this whole Oz. I don't do these transactions, but to me, it's like fascinating. The other question, because I didn't know the states, not all of them accept Oz for state income tax purposes. Is there an ability to form shop and move the corporation to a more friendly jurisdiction, like maybe Texas is more friendly than North Carolina, because it sounds like North Carolina adopted? Is there form shopping opportunities?
Yes. Again, it takes some advanced planning, and if your original deferral, let's say you sold your business and it was located in North Carolina, in 2026 you're still going to have to pay. Well, I'm sorry, you're going to pay the tax on that one up front on the state level. But if you're a C corp and you move your residency, say from California to Nevada, they look to where you're a resident if you sell stock. So your business could still be back in California, and if you're a C corp, it traps the California from taxing the stock, because that's an intangible and that's taxed where you're a resident.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is all stuff that these people who do startups need to know about before they get involved in the startup. I don't, do the partnership, then the conversion. Is that what's going on?
Right. Exactly.
So actually, the startup community, they should meet with you first to outline a plan before they just jump in and do something. What do you say?
Yes. Yeah.
That's what I'm.
And we get a lot of situations. Venture capital guys come to us, and they've got a gain, and then the first thing we'll look at is, hey, do you qualify for 1202? Again, right. An area that there's a lot of footfalls where you fall outside the 1202, but then we, as a safety net, we say, well, we can still defer the gain. It's not as good as exempting it, but we can defer it for a couple of years. And I want to make sure I get this in here, that legislation has been moving for the last couple of years and just reintroduced in Trump's tax proposal, that they'll extend the Oz deferral period until December 31st, 2028. So you'd pay the tax in 2029. So you're going to see, if that goes through, which we're pretty optimistic it will, you're going to see a huge flood of new money come into the Oz arena.
Hey, Blake, just really quickly, this is Mark. I'm one of the producers here on the network and everything, and one of the primary program director and everything. But all along those lines, one of the things that I had a guest on the show that I do on Wednesdays that is a payment center person. So he's got his own payment center, kind of like Stripe and everything like that. I think he's in Florida where Nick used to have roots at and everything. But we were talking yesterday on that show, which is a lot of entrepreneurs and executives and creatives sharing their wisdom and their knowledge about how a lot of people don't have basic knowledge of financial planning and things along those lines. So just wondering your thoughts around that, because it came up that a lot of people don't have a business plan. They don't really have a mission statement, whether they're a nonprofit or a profit. And these are necessities for any business, whether you're a venture capitalist or not. So I was just wondering your take on that, because that's something that we were talking about yesterday afternoon.
No, I agree 100%. And to further complicate things, startup businesses are short of cash, so they can't always, hire a person like me or and actually what I refer to them a lot is I'll say, hey, you should go to the community college or go to the university and talk to them, get an intern, or some professors sometimes will help out. But there's a lot of people that are willing to help, and maybe sometimes they'll just take a piece of the action, get an equity interest, and do some of the work without cash payment. But yeah, they should. I just see so many situations where it's, oh my gosh, if you would have just had a little better advice, you could have saved $20 million.
Oh yeah. Just out of curiosity, do you find that it's a similar thing between nonprofits and profits? Because I know that most venture capitalists are not in the nonprofit market, but I think even in our main host, we did talk about how there are some startups that are still in that nonprofit space. So do you find that it's even a difference between nonprofits and profits into whether they are learning enough about having a mission statement and having kind of a business framework?
Yeah, not nonprofits. It's a whole different world, and people don't realize that it takes a long time to get your tax exempt status from the IRS. And then also just tremendous penalties and things if you don't operate it right. So I talk a lot of people out of going the nonprofit route and say, look, we can manage your taxability. Let's just start off as a for-profit. And if you want to give away, if your mission is to give your money away, contribute it. You can get you get your charitable deduction. We can still have you pay no tax, but the constraints of the nonprofit status are pretty annoying.
Yeah. So Blake, one just a kind of last question. So I put in $100 million. I exit the opportunity zone at $300 million. I have this $200 million. How is the tax treatment of this $200 million handled? Do I pay taxes? Do I not pay taxes? Do I pass it on? Do I get any break on this?
After you've held it for 10 years?
Yes.
Yeah. So again, for federal, it's going to be completely tax-free. State, depends on if you fall into one of those non-conforming states, but most states are going to exempt the gain. So now, yeah, that's completely tax-free income. You can go do whatever you like with it. And so one of the kind of misconceptions is everybody thinks, oh, as soon as they get 10 years to a day, everybody's going to liquidate their Oz fund. Well, most of our wealthy clients are, the conversations with them is, hey, why don't I just keep holding on to this? Because, if my real estate's going to keep appreciating, why should I sell it now? I've got it in this nice tax-free vehicle. It's like a Roth IRA. Right. Why don't you hold on to it until the end of the program in 2047? And it could get extended beyond that. So the very wealthy people are not looking for the tax-free exit. They're in 10 years, they're looking at it in 20, 30 years.
right? And then they keep it in that status. But to me, this is fascinating because it's new. I didn't learn it in school because it did not exist. And so I think every VC, every person who does startups needs to know about this. And they need to get somebody like you on their team, Blake, because I know I'm doing a lot of business. I hire real estate attorneys for real estate. I hire immigration attorneys for immigration. I've got litigation attorneys. I always hire specialists who know what they're doing, because if you try to do it yourself, as I say, you have a fool for a client. But with that, we want to thank Blake Christian, our special guest, and also Dr. Salman Azhar at Duke University. And we'll see you next week on VC Masters. Take care. Bye-bye.
I go anywhere with you, 'cause you fill my mind, or you fill my mind. We could build a dream, start up something new, and the world is on your shoulders, and you feel like falling over. Just let